You represent the decay of justice, Pam. You twist the law to serve power, not people. And today, in this room, in front of these students, you will be forced to answer for it." The audience gasped. A hush fell across the hall. Cameras clicked, phones streamed, and every face turned toward the stage where Zohran Mamdani stood, his voice carrying the weight of raw indignation. His words had cut like glass, sharp and undeniable. Pam Bondi's expression froze for a second. Tight lips, a fixed smile, but her eyes betrayed irritation. This wasn't the polished, legal sparring she had mastered on television. This was different. This was personal. How did the debate descend into such brutal honesty so quickly? What lines had been crossed before the cameras began rolling? And how far would Zohran be willing to go to expose what he saw as hypocrisy at the very heart of his opponent's career? The university auditorium had been chosen for its symbolism, a place where truth was supposed to be dissected, challenged, and defended. Students filled every seat, professors leaned forward with uneasy anticipation, and reporters clustered at the edges, scribbling down each explosive word. Zohran had not come here to offer polite disagreements. He came armed with receipts, court transcripts, public records, and the moral conviction of a man who believed justice was not a game. He knew Pam Bondi was celebrated in some circles, feared in others, but tonight he would drag into the light the contradictions she worked so hard to hide. Pam leaned forward at the table, her microphone catching the sharp inhale before she spoke. "If you want to hurl insults, Congressman, do it. But remember, I built my career in courtrooms. And in courtrooms, evidence, not anger, wins." A ripple of approval came from a corner of the hall, but Zohran was ready. He raised a folder high, pages spilling with highlighted lines. "Then let's talk evidence. Let's talk about the cases you dropped when the corporations wrote checks. Let's talk about the silence you kept when the voiceless begged for help. Who bought that silence, Pam, and how much did it cost you?" The tension was unbearable. The crowd erupted into murmurs, some cheering, others shifting uncomfortably. Cameras zoomed closer. The scandal was writing itself, live. Pam's polished composure cracked for the first time, just enough for the audience to see. "This is beneath the dignity of a debate," she snapped, but her voice carried less conviction than usual. Zohran didn't relent. "Beneath dignity? What about beneath justice? What about beneath the people who trusted you and were betrayed? How do you explain that to them? If you can explain it at all." The room felt like a trial, not a debate. The students, restless, eager for authenticity, leaned forward, whispering among themselves. Professors shifted in their seats, worried about the collapse of civility, and yet no one wanted to leave. This was too raw, too electric. What would happen if Pam failed to answer? Would her reputation, carefully curated over decades, collapse in front of a generation, watching from both the audience and millions of screens across the country? Could Zohran truly dismantle her with words alone? The scandal had begun to unfold, not in whispers behind closed doors, but in front of glaring spotlights and streaming feeds. And Zohran knew this was only the beginning. If you're drawn in already, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Zohran's attack is fair, or is he going too far? And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next in this explosive confrontation. Pam Bondi leaned forward, her voice sharp, her smile tight. "You think you're clever, Congressman, but grandstanding doesn't erase the facts. I upheld the law. I defended my state. And unlike you, I didn't need to scream into microphones to prove my worth. Her words landed with precision, rehearsed, polished, the kind of lines that won her television interviews and applause from donors. Some in the audience clapped cautiously, but it was faint, almost hesitant. Zohran adjusted the microphone, his tone suddenly quieter, almost calm. That silence gripped the room even more than shouting ever could. "You defended your state?" he asked softly, as if weighing each word. "Tell me, Pam, when families lost their homes during the foreclosure crisis, who did you defend then? Did you stand with them, or did you stand with the banks who funded your campaigns?" The auditorium fell into an uneasy hush. Students looked at each other, wide-eyed. Professors exchanged glances. Reporters scribbled furiously. Pam straightened her shoulders. "That's an old smear, and you know it. I never compromised my duty. Those were legal settlements, standard practice." Zohran slammed the folder onto the table, pages fluttering across the stage. "Standard practice?" His voice rose again, steady but filled with fire. "Standard practice is letting Wall Street skate while working families drown. Standard practice is taking checks and pretending justice has been served. Tell these students, is that the kind of legal system they should aspire to inherit?" A chorus of gasps rippled through the audience. Some students clapped defiantly, others shouted, "Answer him," while a few sat in stunned silence. The debate had crossed into dangerous waters, no longer a contest of ideas, but a public reckoning. Pam's carefully built armor cracked further. She snapped back, her tone edged with anger. "You're twisting the truth, Congressman. You don't know the pressure of carrying the law on your shoulders. You don't know the responsibility of keeping order when chaos is at your door." Zohran leaned in, eyes locked on hers. "Order at what cost? Whose chaos are we talking about? The chaos of corporations losing profit margins? Or the chaos of families sleeping in cars, their lives destroyed, while you held press conferences about how tough you were?" Every word hit like a hammer. The tension was unbearable, the air so thick it felt alive. One student stood up, unable to contain himself. "That's what we want to know, Ms. Bondi," he shouted, voice breaking with anger. "Whose side are you on?" The eruption was immediate. Applause, boos, chants. It was no longer a debate, but an uprising of voices. Professors tried to calm the hall, but the current of emotion was too strong. Cameras caught every second. Online, the clips were already going viral, hashtags exploding across social media. Pam raised her hands, trying to regain control. "This isn't a courtroom, this is a circus," she barked. Zohran didn't flinch. "No, Pam, this isn't a circus. This is what happens when truth finally has a stage." And with that, the scandal grew. It was no longer about a policy dispute, no longer a polite conversation about the law. It was raw, unfiltered, and impossible to look away from. But the question remained, could Pam Bondi survive this firestorm? Or would her career, once untouchable, unravel in front of millions of witnesses? The auditorium waited, breathless, for the next strike. If you're watching this, I want to hear your voice. Do you believe Pam Bondi's defense? Or is Zohran exposing the truth at last? Drop a comment below. And if you want to follow this clash to the very end, subscribe now so you don't miss what happens when words turn into history. Pam Bondi's voice sharpened like a blade. "You think you're some kind of crusader, Zohran, but all you are is a performer. You thrive on outrage. You whip up crowds, but you don't deliver results. People like me, we actually did the work. We protected the system. Without us, chaos would reign." She pointed toward the audience, her tone fierce, almost desperate. "And don't be fooled by his theatrics. He doesn't care about you. He cares about headlines." The words struck hard, but Zohran didn't retreat. He stood taller, his voice slow, deliberate. "Headlines?" He shook his head. "Pam, I don't need headlines. I need justice. And justice is not the system you protected. It's the people you ignored. Let's talk about those people. Let's talk about the ones you failed." He pulled a single page from his folder and held it high. "Here's the story of a family who begged your office for help when their home was illegally foreclosed. They lost everything. And what did you do? Nothing. You brushed them aside. You called it not worth pursuing. Not worth pursuing. Tell that to their children who slept in a car." Gasps echoed through the hall. A student in the front row covered her mouth. Reporters leaned in, as if the paper itself carried the scent of scandal. Pam's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the full story. You cherry-pick, you twist, you exploit tragedies for your own gain." Zohran's voice rose, heavy with conviction. "No, Pam, I amplify them because they had no microphone, no cameras, no stage. But you had all the power, and you stayed silent." The crowd erupted, chants rising from the back rows. "Answer him! Answer him!" Pam gripped her microphone with white-knuckled hands. "You don't know what it means to carry the weight of office. You grandstand here because you've never had to make impossible choices." Zohran leaned closer, his tone suddenly softer, piercing through the noise. "Impossible choices? Or convenient ones? Because it looks like you always chose the path that benefited the powerful. And every time you did, ordinary people paid the price." The silence after his words was deafening. Even those who had defended Pam earlier now sat uneasily, shifting in their seats. The students were no longer passive listeners. They were witnesses to a dismantling, piece by piece. Pam, her face flushed, lashed out. "You think you're untouchable, Zohran, but your idealism will crumble. You'll find yourself compromising, just like I had to. And when you do, this holier-than-thou act will collapse." Zohran's eyes flashed. "Then let me fail trying to serve the people, rather than succeed by betraying them." The auditorium thundered with applause, a sound so loud it rattled the walls. Students leapt from their seats, some cheering Zohran's defiance, others simply stunned by the rawness of it all. For a moment, Pam sat frozen. Her authority, once unshakable, now teetered under the weight of public judgment. And yet the scandal was not finished. Whispers spread across the hall. What would Zohran reveal next? Was there more evidence waiting in that folder? Could Pam withstand another blow? Online, the live feed's comments were exploding. Zohran just destroyed her. This is history in the making. She's finished. The stage was set for the final reckoning. If you're following this battle, I want to hear your take. Should leaders be judged by their compromises or by their betrayals? Leave your thoughts below and subscribe to see how this storm reaches its end. The auditorium had become something more than a debate stage. It was a battlefield. The energy was electric, trembling in the walls, vibrating through every chair. Pam Bondi sat stiffly, her smile cracked, her posture rigid, as if her entire reputation balanced on a wire about to snap. Across from her, Zohran Mamdani stood steady, calm yet fierce, holding the room in the palm of his hand. Pam struck back first, desperation creeping into her tone. "You're good with words, Congressman, but words don't govern. Reality does. I made choices to keep order, to keep institutions stable. You talk about justice, but you don't understand the cost of holding a system together. Without stability, there is nothing. No courts, no protections, no law. Some in the audience nodded faintly. The idea of stability was powerful, almost comforting. But Zohran leaned forward, his voice cutting through her argument like steel. Stability, he said, is that what you call it? When stability means children go hungry while corporations grow fat. When stability means families are evicted, their lives shredded while executives buy second homes. That's not stability, Pam. That's oppression wearing a suit and tie. The hall erupted with shouts and applause. The students, the reporters, even some professors clapped, not just in agreement, but in catharsis. They had been waiting for someone to call it out with such raw honesty. Pam's face flushed. She raised her voice, trembling with anger. You live in a fantasy, Zohran. You think the world bends to idealists like you? It doesn't. It crushes them. You'll learn. And when you do, you'll regret these words. Zohran's response was not anger, but a calm, searing truth. If defending people against injustice is fantasy, then I'll live in it proudly, because your reality, the one you defend, is a nightmare for millions. The applause shook the auditorium. Students stamped their feet, chanting his name. Zohran, Zohran. The chant spread, swelling until it felt like the walls themselves would crack. Pam tried to shout over them. You're dangerous. You fuel division. You tear apart institutions that protect us. Zohran raised his hand, and the room fell into silence as if on command. His voice, measured and steady, carried farther than Pam's shouting ever could. Division, he asked. Pam, division already exists. It exists between the rich and the poor, between the powerful and the powerless. I didn't create it. I refuse to ignore it. And institutions that fail the people don't deserve protection. They deserve reform or replacement. Gasps, applause, roaring cheers. It wasn't just a debate anymore, it was a reckoning. Pam looked around desperately, as though searching for an escape. But the audience wasn't with her anymore. Even those who had supported her earlier now stared in silence, their confidence shaken. Zohran lifted the last sheet from his folder. His voice dropped, almost whispering, yet every ear strained to hear. Here's what it comes down to. Public service is not about protecting power. It's about protecting people. And when you betray them, you betray the very idea of justice. He laid the paper flat on the table, then pushed it toward her. This is a statement from one of the families you failed. I won't read it all, it's too painful, but I will read the final line. He paused, then let the words fall like a hammer. They wrote, "We lost faith in the law, because the law lost faith in us." A silence heavier than any before filled the hall. Pam Bondi lowered her eyes, her shoulders slumped. Her defenses had collapsed. The polished mask was gone, stripped bare by a relentless truth she could no longer outrun. Zohran turned from her to the audience, his gaze sweeping the room. This is why I fight, not for applause, not for headlines, but for those voices, for the ones ignored, dismissed, erased. Justice is not measured by how powerful people are treated. It's measured by how the most powerless are defended. And if we lose sight of that, then all we have left is corruption. The hall exploded with standing ovations. Students jumped from their seats, chanting his name louder and louder. Professors clapped, some with tears in their eyes. Reporters sent headlines into the world. Bondi cornered, Mamdani shines. Pam sat frozen, the debate already lost, the scandal cemented. Her name would forever be tied to this night, not as the victor she imagined, but as the exposed symbol of a failing system. Zohran raised his hand once more, the crowd quieting in respect. "Remember this," he said firmly. "The law should not serve the powerful. It should serve the people. And if it doesn't, then it is not justice at all." The applause thundered again, echoing through the auditorium, echoing into history. In that moment, Zohran Mamdani was not just a politician, not just a debater. He was a hero, standing against a storm, unshaken. And the scandal that began with words now ended with a legacy. If you've stayed through this journey, share your thoughts in the comments. Should leaders sacrifice people for so-called stability? Or should justice always come first? Subscribe so you never miss stories like this, because sometimes truth doesn't just speak, it roars.